Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode. I have been following Laura McKowen for quite a few years on Instagram and all the places. And I secretly really wanted to be her friend for a long time. And I was really jealous because she's friends with my friend Andrea. And I was like, I want to be friends with her too. And then I read her book. She has a memoir that came out recently called We Are the Luckiest. And it's a sobriety memoir, but it is so much more than that. If you are not sober, if you're not struggling to get sober, if you have no intention of ever getting sober, I still think you should read this book. Because, one of the things that she talks about a lot in the book is like, whatever your thing is. And guys, we all have a thing. And by the way, most of us have way more than one thing. Alcohol didn't become my thing until I was well into my 40s. Before that, relationships, people, men, food. I mean, I've had so many things. And the wisdom in Laura's memoir is applicable to every single thing that you can imagine. So please read it. Like I said, I feel so honored to have Laura on the podcast today. I think that maybe we're going to be friends now because I think maybe she liked me. I'm just kidding. I mean, a little bit. So Laura is the author of We Are the Luckiest. She is a former public relations executive who has become recognized as a fresh voice in the recovery movement. Beloved for her soulful and irreverent writing, so true. She now leads sold-out yoga-based retreats and courses that teach people how to say yes to a bigger life. She hosted the iTunes Top 100 podcast Home with over 1.5 million downloads and has been featured on The Today Show, in The Guardian, New York Times, WebMD, and more. She also has a fabulous Instagram page that you should head on over and follow. That's in the show notes. This was a really important conversation to me as someone who is coming up on 2 years of sobriety, right? I'm still kind of pretty early in sobriety. And so, and while my story is completely different from Laura's, so much of the feelings and the process and, it's so much is the same. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether it's alcohol or not. I actually related to so much of Laura's story and appreciated the wisdom in her book. In some places more from not the alcohol perspective of my life. So I'll shut up now and I will bring you my conversation with Laura McKowen. Hey, Laura, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thank you.
I have to say, I'm going to fangirl for a minute because your book, I love it so much. I admit I just read it, which is so dumb.
No, why is that dumb?
Well, just because, it's been around for a little while.
A few months, yeah.
Well, okay, I listened to it. I didn't read it. And it was one of those things where I was like, everywhere I went, I was like, wait, can I keep listening? Do I have enough time?
Yep.
I love it. And one of the things that I love is that while it's a sobriety memoir, it is not remotely just about that. And I want to impress upon my listeners that, even if you don't relate to the story of alcoholism or sobriety, this is a book that touches everyone, right? Because you talk about that. Like your thing was alcohol, but
we all have a thing, many of them.
Many things. Exactly. But one of the things that I think is really relevant is that you talk about your marriage and that you got divorced in the midst of all of this.
Yes.
talk to us a little bit about that and what that was like from you from a sobriety.
Yeah. And where it fell in the timeline of things.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I got married in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I had sort of kind of knew that I liked alcohol more than other people. I had like this internal worry about my drinking, but it certainly wasn't a thing where it was like, I'm going to have to quit someday or something like that. I blended into, and drinking was a big part of me and my ex-husband's courtship and all of that as we were in our 20s, and we separated in 2012. And gosh, there's so much to this. So we separated in 2012, and I say this in the book, and I think it's true as much as we can know our stories, like, because it's really hard to figure out why marriages fall apart. Like because there's so many things.
Exactly.
But
absolutely.
I know it wasn't just about the drinking, but the drinking made everything worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As it tends to do.
Yeah. It wasn't like there wasn't, I was actually the one who wanted out, and my drinking was the only really coping mechanism that I had at that time of my life for really until I got sober. I didn't know what to do except for to drink at things.
Yeah.
And he was, because he was the closest person to me, saw what drinking really was like for me. And even he didn't know, right? Like I even hid things from him.
Interesting.
But he did say many times, stop fucking drinking. Like, this is a problem for you.
Right.
So when we separated in 2012, I was so relieved because, I think a lot of people feel relief because you've been at war for, or like wrestling with this decision for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I really felt relief because I could finally drink the way I wanted to drink.
Mm.
And he wasn't, because we definitely had these like parent-child roles, where I was the naughty child and he was the parent. And one of the things that he monitored was my drinking. And then once he was gone, I didn't have anyone watching me anymore. But that also meant that my drinking got really bad. Like it just spiked. And it was already bad, but it got very scary.
Right.
And then it took us 3 years to actually file for divorce, but we were separated for 3 years. And I think there was a combination of, reasons why that was true, but our daughter was 3 at the time when we got separated. I hit my sort of bottom that I talk about at the very beginning of the book in 2013. So it was like a year, and in that 2012 to 2013 was a freaking dark year.
Yeah.
I mean, drinking wise, it was like, I was completely unhinged. I didn't know what was going to happen to me anymore. When I started drinking, I was sleeping with all kinds of people. The wheels just completely came off. And
you were blacking out too, right? Like you were waking
always
up and like, how the fuck did I get here? And
blacking out. And yeah, it was just one horror show after another, and almost getting fired from my job. And I got a DUI in May of 2013, and that was horrific. And then the bottom incident what I talked about was when I left my daughter in a hotel room overnight at my brother's wedding because I was blacked out. And that's what got me started on working towards sobriety. I didn't get sober until a year and a half later. But I started dipping my toe in sobriety at that point, which I'd never done before.
right.
So, there's sort of the divorce part, but there's the bigger, if you zoom out, the relationship part, and alcohol for me, the relationships with men, romantic relationships and sex and all that was just like so tightly linked.
I so relate to that.
Most women do.
I mean, it's crazy how I think when I first got sober, and I've only been sober for 19 months, maybe like almost 2 years ish. And it's like the first time I had sex sober, it was like, I wanted to wait a really long time because I was like, I don't actually know how to do this.
Yeah.
When I looked back at my life, besides with my ex-husband, I never drank. Like I didn't drink in my marriage because I was married to a sober person. So we like never drank.
Yeah.
And I would
right.
and I was never the alcoholic. That's the thing.
Right. He was.
I was always I'm the Al-Anon. I am the 100%.
Lucky you.
Yeah. But when I got divorced, my drinking increased and increased and increased. And that intimacy, like that block and that like every relationship and every ounce of sex I think I had since my divorce was in some way fueled by alcohol. And so when I took alcohol out of the picture, I was like, well, I don't know if I even want to do this.
Yeah. It's completely bizarre. It's a total, it's an entirely different experience. I mean, the first time I had sex, I was drunk, and pretty much every time after that, with the exception of with my husband, because we were together for so long, but every other time I can honestly say I was intoxicated to some degree, and oftentimes extraordinarily intoxicated. Right.
Right.
So I didn't know how to do any of that sober. That was a whole learning.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to even be in relationship with someone without alcohol as like the third party.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all. I still don't. I'm still not sure I do, because I was just really starting to date in earnest when the pandemic hit.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, I don't either. I mean, it's not that the alcohol's not there, but it's like, we're new. We have to learn everything.
Yeah.
Over again.
Yeah. And I love, one of the things that I really appreciate about your book is that it doesn't end with you like, and when you introduced John, I was like, John's going to be the guy that she ends up married to and everything's happily ever after. And I was like, and at the end,
no, this is not an Eat, Pray, Love story.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not that I love that story and I love her, but this is not that.
Exactly. And I appreciate that. I appreciate it so much. And I think my audience will too, by the way. I'm the same way.
Yeah. There is no fairy tale yet, yet, or maybe ever.
I'm not the divorce coach who tells everyone that I'm now happily remarried and and you can too, or even if they don't say it, there's an implication, right? And
but we're headed there, right?
Yep. Totally not sure that that's ever going to be a thing, but here I am, a lot happier.
Yeah.
A lot fucking happier. And I think that sort of is a great segue into, one of the chapters in your book the title of it is Find a House Where the Truth is Told. And I felt like your book actually was so much that house, right? And I think that, my Facebook group in particular is a place where the truth is told by thousands of women. And I think that you and I sort of share that mission and align with that mission of telling the fucking truth, even if it's not like wrapped up in a pretty little bow, right?
Yeah. It's the only way. It's the only way.
Yeah, it really is. And for your experience, that was started in the rooms of AA.
Yeah.
Right. But then I just think it's a metaphor for so much else. Right.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know how to tell the truth about anything. I didn't grow up in a house where the truth was told. I think that we all kind of learn to lie a little bit or a lot about as we grow up, whether it's to keep up appearances or to not hurt people or to make things easier or to keep the peace or whatever. We learn to lie a little or a lot.
Yeah.
And what that looked like for me eventually was there were so many different versions of Laura in the world. None of them of which were really who I was. I didn't even really know who I was. There was work Laura, and every different almost relationship had it. And I had so many lies, I had so many lies, and addiction really breeds that. You have to start lying to sort of keep this thing going because you don't want people to see what's really going on. But I also just lied so easily. It became this, I didn't think that I could tell the truth. I just didn't think that was an option. And really when I talk about this conversation with my husband in maybe not that chapter, but a different one about telling the truth, where I was not faithful to him. Like I wasn't. And I drank a lot. Like that was all fueled by and medicated by alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, and I loved him, and I wanted to be married to him, and I didn't want to be married to him, and I didn't know how to do it. And, right. All these many things were true at the same time. And I remember sitting at dinner with him one night and just thinking like, you're like 2 feet away from me, but I have an entire world inside of me that you don't know anything about. And I could burst that. I could change that by just saying a few words, but I won't, and I can't, and I never will. And so I just accepted that I would always lie.
Yeah. Right. And I love when you talk about how you had to like come out of that like when you committed yourself to telling the truth, that you would like call people and be like, when I said that lied to you about like the stupidest thing, like actually I've never been to that restaurant. I don't know why I said I did, but like,
I still have to do that. It's so freaking weird.
But it's so great that you like, right. Cause the way it sounds to me like the way that you clean it up is just so like, I don't know. There's like almost, I'm sure there is judgment on your part. Right. But it's like, oh, I did that thing. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that thing, but I did it. And you move on and then you're free.
Right. Well, ultimately the there is this saying that secrets keep you sick, and it's true. They really do. Mm-hmm. It was a matter of life and death for me to not have many versions of myself in the world. It was a matter of life and death for me to have one version of myself, one version. And that doesn't mean everybody knows everything about me. And that's not what that means, but it means that I'm not hiding things, and I don't have secrets, especially secrets from myself. And there are people in my life who do know everything, and I have to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Because the moment I start getting sneaky, I'm in trouble, So yeah, it becomes this sort of, when we lie, when we're untruthful, and untruthful, what I learned is not just like, we know when we're outright deceiving people. We know that. That's like what we think of when we think of lying.
Right.
But I realized that I lied in these more socially acceptable ways, like people pleasing. We don't typically think of that as a form of dishonesty, but it is. It's a insidious form of dishonesty.
It is. It really is. And I want to actually, I want to hear all the other versions, but I also want to come back to that, because I think that's
we can just go down that route.
Yeah. I mean, because it's so true. Right. And as a card carrying former people pleaser.
Yeah.
It's an intense form of dishonesty.
Yes. And it's almost a prized form of dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
I'm such a people pleaser. I'm a good person. My intentions are so good. And what happens, so when we people please, when we say we want to do something that we don't want to do, when we say yes when we know, or no when we mean yes, and I don't mean like in big ways, I mean like small things, like, can you talk right now?
Uh-huh.
I said, Kate, I send you a text, I need to talk right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you are in the middle of doing something really important, and you've had a shitty day and you have no energy and you just can't do it, but you say yes because you're supposed to. You're being dishonest with me, being emotionally dishonest with me. And over the course of a life or a relationship, that just, you build all this resentment, and that person, you're depriving that person of honest experience of who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
And because they don't know you're resentful, but you're fucking resentful.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I was going to say, when you're saying yes to everything, you think like, I'm such a good person, I'm such a giver. It's like, well, you're not, right? You're actually, you are,
because you don't mean it.
You don't mean it. You build resentments, and you also, there's something else about how it's like you're lying to yourself that you're a good, it's so twisted and insidious, like you said.
Yeah. And we do it for good reasons, right? Especially women are so trained that this is how you're supposed to be. That's what it means to be a good person. And there are men that feel that way too, but it's dishonesty. And what helps me, it helps me so much to hear it in those terms and to see it in those terms, because then it was like, oh, that's something I want to fix. Like I could see it took when you are constantly people pleasing, you feel like you have no choice. Like it's out of your control, right? You aren't taking responsibility. Well, everyone just expects me to be there, and I have to be there for everybody, and I have to do this and I have to do that. And there's no responsibility there. But when you look at it like, oh, I'm the one injuring another person by doing this, it's like, okay, all right, I have to take responsibility for this. So it actually, to me, it was very empowering, not easy, but very empowering. So that was massive to me, because what happened is, as part of like my work in sobriety, I took inventory of all my relationships, and the relationships where I had felt the most tension and was the most stress was where I had this dynamic.
Right.
Yeah. And it was like, the common thread here is Laura doesn't show up as who she is.
Yeah. Right.
Almost from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because we want to be liked, and we want to be, that's all for good reasons.
Well, yes, but I mean, I don't know that that's actually a good reason, right? Like it's actually self-serving, right? Because it's like, you think it's for other people. You're like, well, I want to be there for other people. But what you really want to do is be liked. So it's actually about you.
Oh yeah. No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's good reason. We are always just trying to get our needs met.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
That's all we're ever doing. That's all anyone's ever doing. And a lot of us have learned the way we get our needs met is to be likable.
Right. Especially women.
But we feel this internal, when we don't have relationships where we are showing up as we actually are,
mm-hmm.
we're extraordinarily lonely anyway. So it's this big catch.
Yes, absolutely.
And now we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor today. Today's sponsor is SoberLink. Now, the SoberLink system is designed to make parenting time safer with real-time remote alcohol monitoring. SoberLink uniquely combines a breathalyzer with wireless connectivity and is the only system that includes facial recognition, tamper detection, and advanced reporting. Parents can submit a test anytime, anywhere, thanks to SoberLink's wireless technology, which delivers test results by text message or email to the concerned parties. Simplify co-parenting arrangements by using the system that provides transparency and proof of sobriety throughout the day. Flexible schedules combined with real-time delivery of results make SoberLink the experts in remote alcohol monitoring technology. And for a limited time, get $50 off your device by emailing info@soberlink.com and mentioning the Divorce Survival Guide. And now back to our show.
So what are some of the other sort of insidious ways that we're not honest, since we were sort of going down that path?
I mean, that's a big one. Connected to that, or maybe adjacent to that, is not having boundaries, not expressing boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that looks a lot like people pleasing, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it can happen. Yeah, it's definitely.
It can. Yeah. Right. I mean, I would put it all under the people pleasing category.
Yeah, it probably really is. It probably really is. Yeah.
Keeping the peace. Any way that you sort of shape shift
mm-hmm.
and make what you think the other person wants you to do more important than what is true for you.
I used to do this thing just because I was so fiercely codependent, right? Where, when I was at the height of my codependency and it was like really like intense and I was bottoming out on that.
Yeah.
Over 20 years ago, when I first walked into my first Al-Anon, before I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting, right? And what I would do is like, I couldn't tell you my favorite color. Like I had no sense of who I was at all.
Nope.
Because I was constantly had my focus on the other person, always, right? What do you want? Well, what do you like, right? And we would do this thing where I remember my ex-husband and I would be like walking down the street. We lived in New York and you know, in New York, you kind of stop at all the cafes and all the restaurants and you look at the menus outside and you decide where you want to eat. And I would always just stand back because it didn't matter, right? Because it was the only thing that mattered was what he wanted to eat, right? But then I would go into the restaurant and there would be nothing that I wanted to eat on the menu. And then I'd be resentful and annoyed that like I didn't like anything, but that was his problem. It was his fault, right?
It's a perfect example.
Right?
Yeah.
It's totally like, I'm such a people pleaser that then I'm fucking angry and then we're having a shitty night.
Yep. That's a perfect example.
But I couldn't have told you what I wanted to eat.
Right. Well, that's the problem with codependency. Is like the disease of the lost self.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You just don't know.
Yeah. You have a chapter that I think is like the most brilliant thing ever. I told you this before we started recording. It's called the pregnancy principle. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it applies to everything, not just the freaking. So can you talk about what that is, what the pregnancy principle is?
Sure. So when I was a few months sober, actually it was like after a year sober, and I started to think about, because I struggled really hard to get sober. It wasn't I show up at the first 12-step meeting and I'm off. It was like, I was in what I call purgatory for a long time. Mm-hmm. I fought it really hard. It was the last thing I wanted and all that. So I got to be about a year sober and I started like reflecting on why I had made it. When I really, what made the difference, when I really thought many times that I just was never going to get sober. I just didn't think I could.
Wow.
And what spurred the pregnancy principle was I started writing, like before I was even sober, I started writing about all of this, but people would send me letters. I had like a section on my blog called Dear Laura, and someone sent me a letter about how she was going to have a dinner party. She was like 4 months sober. She's going to have a dinner party. And she was struggling with a decision of whether to serve alcohol or not, because the guests expected, they had in the past, they'd always had alcohol and at their dinners, and her husband still drank. And she was just like doing this struggle thing that we do. So in my response to her, I developed this whole pregnancy principle theory, because what became very obvious to me was I was saving my life by getting sober. Mm-hmm. And it required, this is what I thought of. I thought, when in my life was I so clear about what was required to do this thing I was doing, and where I just, as a people pleaser and all that, didn't give a fuck about what other people were thinking. And I remembered that's how it was when I was pregnant. And it's pretty much how it is when anyone's pregnant. And you don't have to be a woman and you don't have to have ever been pregnant to get this. We sort of have this mutual understanding, a societal understanding of pregnant women. Like, you don't question their choices of what they're eating, or whether they need sleep, or how precious it is, or how important it is. We just go, yeah, you do what you need to do. Okay, well,
that's a whole other story.
we're not married to him anymore.
We are not.
But you know what I mean. Like, generally, people
undermine what your point. It's just
generally people
like,
get it.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, that happens. Yep, that's the thing that happened.
That is the thing that happened.
God.
But right, exactly. People are generally like, if you're like, I'm pregnant and I need to take a nap, people are like, go lie down.
Or I'm pregnant, so I'm not eating the sushi. Or I'm pregnant, so I'm not going to drink with you tonight. Whatever it is.
Right, I'm not drinking because I'm pregnant. Mm-hmm.
Right. So generally, that is how it works. And I was like, how is this any different? It's not any different. Getting sober is not any different. Or really surviving what you need to survive so that you can save your life, whether it's an abusive relationship, an eating disorder, the death of a loved one, a divorce, right? In order for something new to grow, there has to be a boundary. Like, this is like true physically, it's true biologically, right? You put plants in a pot.
Yeah.
They have to have that boundary in order to have a shot at growing. Mm-hmm. So sobriety, I was like, because to me, when she wrote me that letter, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Of course you don't have alcohol. Like, that's just it's so ridiculous. Of course you don't, Right. But I also know that hemming and hawing because I did it too. But what made the difference for me and why at the time that I wrote that letter, I had 11 months or whatever of sobriety was because I treated my sobriety like I had a life growing inside of me, because I did. I treated it with the same attention and respect and care that I did my pregnancy.
Absolutely.
So what that meant was I respected the process, that I was in a process and that it was going to take a while, you know?
Yes.
And that process is sort of out of our control in a way. You know, we can control some things and we can't control a lot. We don't control the fact that a pregnancy is 9 months, no matter what, no matter how much we want to influence that. It doesn't go faster, doesn't go slower for the most part.
Right.
We don't really have to understand everything that happens either. We just have to respect that we are in a process. It also meant that anything that threatened my sobriety, anyone or anything had to fucking go.
Yeah.
Had to go.
Yep.
And so those were the basic, premises. And like, it just seemed like such an easy way to articulate that because everyone gets it, right?
Yeah.
There's 4 points in the pregnancy principle. I can't think of it right now, but it's like essentially that, like, you're in a process, accept that. Mm-hmm. And anything that doesn't support this process has to go.
Yeah. Right. And that's so, and I think that, like I said, like, I think that it applies to almost any big change I think that you're going through. It's really relevant to divorce. I think that we all forget that divorce is a process. We don't want it to be a process. Right?
No.
We want it to be like, I'm done, I'm free, I'm out, let's go.
Because the lead up to getting a divorce is so much struggle, right?
Right, exactly. And that's part of the process, by the way. Like the divorce itself, it's like the process is this big arc, and like the divorce itself might be at the pinnacle of that arc, but they're like the arc is still going. Like you're still.
Oh my God. I joke that divorce is a gift that never stops giving.
Never.
Like I've been divorced for 8 years, and it doesn't ever stop.
It really doesn't. I've been divorced for almost 11, and it's one of those things that. I mean, our relationship, I say that divorce is like a living, breathing entity. Like if you have kids, you're tethered forever. And my relationship with my ex has like gone up and down and up and down. We're now in a band together. We're in a pandemic band together with our son and like my neighbors. So like we're in a good spot right now, but there have been times when we didn't speak for a period of time.
That's so good to hear, because it's like the lows can be hard. It's a long-term relationship still.
It is.
You have to look at it that way.
And there's no other relationship like it, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's no other person that like you literally have to stay connected to on a quite intimate level while also having like really strong boundaries, while also having to witness things that are like really painful, like, my ex-husband got married, or, when he got engaged, that was like to a friend of mine, by the way. So like, there's just like, there's literally no other relationship like it.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. I like I said before we recorded, I haven't talked much about this, other than with friends. And most of my friends are married.
Right. Yes.
I was early to get divorced. Yeah.
I'll talk to you about this all day, every day. Because it's so, and then, I know I've fucked up and had to make amends for like my major fuck ups in the divorce,
Yes.
Long after the divorce. And then, he's done shit. And then I've watched him do shit that triggered the hell out of me. He didn't do anything to me, but he was doing stuff on the, others that was triggering shit that happened that I thought I was done with.
Right. Oh my God. It's so real.
And by the way, the biggest one, Laura, was the biggest trigger I had where I hit my emotional bottom with my ex was something that got triggered when I'd been sober for 1 month.
Ugh.
And I was like, now I have no tools.
Totally.
The only choice I have is to actually be with this feeling. And I think that my drinking had increased over the 10 years since my divorce because I wasn't processing so much of the trauma and the pain and all of it. I wasn't dealing with it. I was just happy to be out.
I so get that. I thought I had like bypassed all that.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm out. So it's fine. We're done.
Right. I'm out. And I was drinking so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to get sober, which required everything to survive. So I still wasn't processing.
Right.
I didn't even start to until like 5 years after.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, here it is.
Right.
Oh,
100%.
Oh,
yeah.
Here it is.
Here it is. And then like that started for me 1 month of sobriety because it got like smashed in my face.
Oh my God.
And I was like, and it was also Christmas. Like, such a nightmare.
Oh my God.
It was a nightmare, but it really is. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It never, ever stops.
No. And I sort of settled into that now around 8 years. Cause hey, just keep thinking like, oh, we've hit a stride and it's all good. And then it's like, boom. Okay. There's another level I didn't know about.
Yep. And that's the thing that, and I think that, I get this question all the time from women, from my clients and from women in my Facebook group or wherever, listeners. And they're like, how do I handle the grief, or how do I handle, the pain, or I just don't want, and I feel like what they're actually asking me is, how do I not feel it? Mm-hmm. How does it not hurt so much?
Yeah.
And it's a horrible thing to have to say. How you handle it is by actually going like real fucking deep with it. Right. Yeah. Like get yourself,
that's the truth with everything. It's an unfortunate truth with everything, but we fear, pain is the teacher, man. It is the teacher.
It totally is. It totally is. And there's so much freedom, as much as I hate it and we all hate it. Right. But there's so much freedom on the other side of just fucking going deep, going dark with it. Right. And letting it pull you under.
Yes.
Right.
Have you ever heard the equation, like pain times resistance equals suffering?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Usually the resistance that is making us suffer so badly. And once we actually go, okay, I'm going to let this grief take me down. And Carla McLaren is this writer that talks about emotions. And she says that grief is what brings us into the river of all souls. And I just love that metaphor, because what happens for me in deep grief, what has happened for me is you enter this different realm of the human experience. It has the potential to breed such compassion and sort of depth. It's alchemical, like it changes you, right? In the way that you need to be changed. And one of the primary ways that it changes you for me is made me so much more compassionate for other people's pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's bigger than you. It is a river. And the river part is that it has to move. It's supposed to move.
Right.
It needs to move. It's energy it's slow moving energy, but it needs to move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love, you do talk, I'm so related to this. I was like, oh girl, when you talked about the day that you were just sort of flattened, literally on the floor, right? Where you were being hit with a wave of all sorts of really big feelings. And your first instinct was, I'm going for a run and I'm going to run it off and I'm going to run it out. Right. And then you ended up literally on the floor and just allowing all the feels.
Yeah.
I thought I was so related to that moment. I was like, yep.
Well, in that moment, like whenever I have been able to do that, and there's always a lot of struggle before that happens. Mm-hmm. Whenever I've been able to do that, I am met there.
Yes.
For me, that's experience of God. That's an experience of whatever people want to call it. I just say God.
Yeah.
And that is what I mean by that's where you get changed. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You really do. You really do. You know what happens for me every time when I do that is my best friend calls me within like 10 minutes of me like getting like over it. So we have this like psychic connection, and like without fail, he will like the phone will ring. I'm like, damn, how did you do that? He's so good.
I love that.
Yeah, he's so good. Can we talk about Fantasy Island?
Yes, oh, please. Oh my God. Fantasy Island is like the prequel to another book.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what's the Fantasy Island like principle.
Well, it's this fantasy that I always had that someone is going that there. Well, there's a few different things in the book. It's like there's this place where everything is beautiful and it works perfectly, and people are happy, and they're married. They're married to their soulmates, and they drink with no consequence, and it's like that. There's this place where life is perfect and beautiful, and nothing hurts.
Right. Yes. Total utopia. And everyone else is living that life, and you're the only one who's not.
Right. You're the one that's fucked up and not quite getting it.
Right.
And you just have to, and you clearly just have to try harder. For me, It was like,
right.
Well, and when I think about it in terms of drinking, it's like, well, clearly I'm just not, all these people can drink and it just seems to work, and that they're not doing, like, it's not affecting them the way it affects me. So clearly I just have to try harder, right? I'm just not doing it right.
I have to drink right. I'm drinking wrong.
I have to drink right. I have to manage it better.
Right.
And in a way that idea is real, when the fantasy is real, what I have realized is that you have letting go of that fantasy. Mm-hmm. So there's a fantasy of the drinking thing, but then there's the fantasy of the relationship that's going to save me.
Yeah.
And that's almost like I have learned in sobriety that is the thing underneath the thing. It's like, that's the roots of it all. Right.
100%. Me too.
I think for most people,
100%.
It's like there's a person.
Yes. Who's going to
There's a relationship that's going to save me.
100%.
Right.
And when I'm skinny enough, right, then he'll show up. Which, by the way, I have been skinny enough and he didn't show up. I was literally just talking to my eating disorder therapist about this morning.
Yeah.
Right. So, when my business is successful enough, when I make enough money, when I have the right clothes, all of the then he'll be able to show up. Right. I've got to clear out all of that stuff so that he can show up, so that then I'll be okay.
And then everything will be perfect and nothing will hurt anymore.
Perfect. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's really been my big work in sobriety, and letting go of that fantasy is still hard.
Yeah.
It's really disappointing, but I have accepted that that's not true, and I have spent enough time getting to know myself and dating and all that, enough people to go like, oh, I'm the one. I'm the one. Right.
Right.
But to me, it's extraordinarily disappointing.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is.
It's really a bummer. I was saying, you said in the book,
I hate saying that because it sounds like such a bummer, but it just is.
Fucking sucks. I'm so boring. Someone else would be so much more exciting. And you said in the book, you're like, I'm going to write a book about like online dating in your 40s. And I was like, oh, I'm going to co-author that with you.
Yeah, please do.
I've tapped myself to write that book with you because holy shit.
It's a whole thing.
Oh my God. It is such a whole thing. And I don't want to like, my poor listeners are like, wait, don't tell.
Where are we going? Right.
But it's, one thing that I'll say is that I do think this is really important because I hear this all the time from women, because should I stay or should I go is my biggest, that's my sweet spot. That's where I live. That's where I do my work. And, one of the things that I hear over and over and over again is like, I'm so afraid. And it's this incredibly raw moment when women come to this realization of like, I don't want to be alone. What if I'm alone forever? What if I never meet anyone else? And my response is usually like, you might not. Like, I'm not going to fucking sugarcoat this, and I'm not going to bullshit you. You actually might not. You might also be okay with that. Or better said, because I don't know that I'm okay with the idea that I might never meet someone and I might live the rest of my life alone. Like, I'm not actually okay with that.
It sounds like you should be, but no, I don't think anyone is.
No, exactly. But what I will say is that I am alone. And I'm not fucking miserable.
That's right.
I am not incomplete alone.
No. I've had some of the happiest years of my life alone.
Yeah.
Like truly.
Yeah, totally. Me too. I mean, oh my God, way more happy than I was when I was married. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
And, we had some happy times, but the answer, so it's not like a, cookie cutter pie in the sky, rainbows and unicorns, right? On either end, I'm not going to say like, of course you will. And I'm sure as hell not going to say, but I will say, you might not. And you might be, you're going to be okay if you do the work.
Yeah. If you do the work is always the asterisks, it's the same thing with people when they quit drinking. I mean, it's funny because the situations are similar. Like people aren't generally coming to you in a happy marriage, right? Obviously,
right.
They're suffering.
Right.
And people don't go to get sober because their relationship with alcohol is fine. Right. They're suffering.
Right.
But we are so afraid of what we don't know. And we're so afraid. I was afraid of what life was going to look like with alcohol. I thought it was game over. I thought it was the end of everything.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, truly, I thought it was the end of everything. And
to not drink.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah,
totally.
So, and it's not. It was like, it's not. But that doesn't mean that there weren't real losses.
100%.
It doesn't mean that there wasn't real grief. It doesn't mean that even sometimes still there's like, man,
bummer.
Yeah. Right. But like net. Wow.
100%. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
No.
And there are also some days when I'm like, oh, that looks really good.
I know. Or like, God, it would be so, I wish I could just go somewhere else for fucking 4 hours,
Yeah. Right. Ugh.
Right. But it is the fantasy too. Like that's not real.
Right.
The reality for me is there's no relief, not even for a minute. I don't think I'd feel a minute of relief drinking at this point, but, and just like going back to that relationship that isn't right for you anymore, whatever, there's no relief there.
Right. Well, exactly. And like, that's the choice, right? It's the choice between the misery, and the possibilities of whatever that you don't know, right? Or just the unknown.
Right.
And at a certain point, the misery that really does just become too unbearable.
Yes.
If that is that miserable.
Yes. Right. And that do I stay or do I go question? God bless you for taking that one on.
It's a big one. It's a big one. And, the thing that I say about doing the work is that while, and I think this is relevant, this is definitely relevant to your work too, is that, 50% of we all say like for 50% of first marriages end in divorce, but 68% of second marriages also do.
Really?
And 73% of third marriages do. But that's only because we're not doing the work, right? It's because we're like, oh, he was an asshole, so let me just get a new one.
Yeah.
Right? Or she was the problem. So, just trade them out and not actually focus on,
I don't think I'm in any danger of that. I can't imagine getting married again any more than I can imagine, like, I don't know, having another kid. Right. It just seems so ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Not that I don't want it, but yeah, I can see that. I mean, my mom has been married 5 times,
That's right. That's amazing.
She just went, kept going.
Right. And not doing the work to figure out for herself, like, why she was making the choices that she was making. Exactly.
Right.
She's proof positive.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's about doing the work, right? We can bypass it all we want, but the results will literally be the same.
Yeah. I say we don't get away with anything.
We don't.
Don't get away with anything, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
We try. We tried
for years, and then here we are.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Laura, I think we could talk about all of this all day, but thank you so much for coming.
This is so fun.
Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah. So all my work is on my website, which is my name, lauramckowen.com. And then I'm on Instagram, although I've been taking a little break for a month.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I had to. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I am there, and I actually do love it when I'm in the right place. I'm on Facebook, but my website is probably the best. That's where.
And everything will be in the show notes. And your book is called We Are the Luckiest. And I really highly recommend, whether you're struggling with alcohol or not, that this is a memoir that I was talking to Laura Belgray, and we were talking about books, and I was like, and
I love her so much.
so Laura and I went to the same elementary school, or like
no
we went
way.
Well, she got there in high school, like so we've known each other for we grew up around the corner from each other. So
oh my God, so you're a New Yorker?
Yeah, I am. And so, but I was talking to Laura Belgray, and she was like, I don't always love memoir. She's like, it's ridiculous I'm writing a memoir. I know. I don't find them the easiest to reach. She's like, but Laura's memoir was so good. It's so not, and I feel exactly the same way. I feel exactly the same way.
That's such a compliment. I love her.
I do too. For people who don't know who Laura is, she's a writer.
She is a professional writer.
So, but it's I love it. I love the book, and I love it from. I mean, yes, I related to the drinking part, but I related more, I think, to the process and the journey and the humanity part. Just
Thank
growth.
you.
Yeah, I loved it.
Thank you.
Highly recommend everyone read it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.